In a world obsessed with having the last word, silence has become a forgotten virtue. We live in a culture where every insult demands a reply, every offense a public defense, and every slight a social media war. Yet, there is a sacred power in staying quiet after disrespect, a power that reshapes your spirit and draws you closer to divine wisdom. When someone wounds your pride or mocks your name, everything in your flesh cries out to respond. But silence, true, God-given silence, is not surrender, it's strategy. It's the language of the wise and the shield of the righteous. The quiet heart doesn't react, it reflects. It allows God to speak into the storm before the storm speaks through you. It resists the urge to prove, to fight, to explain, and instead it chooses peace. Staying quiet after disrespect is not weakness, it's warfare. It's choosing faith over fury, dignity over drama, and trust over turmoil. And when you master that silence, your spirit begins to walk in a new dimension of strength, one that no insult, no betrayal, and no disrespect can destroy. Silence has long been misunderstood. To many, it seems like retreat or surrender, a sign of weakness or fear. But in truth, silence, especially after being disrespected, is one of the greatest indicators of strength, wisdom, and spiritual maturity. When a person can stay calm when insulted, it means they have discovered something deeper than pride. They have learned mastery over self. Anyone can shout back, argue, or defend their reputation, but it takes an extraordinary strength to remain composed, to let the storm rage around you while you stand unmoved. That is not the silence of weakness. It is the silence of one who knows who they are and who their God is. When Jesus stood before his accusers, mocked and condemned, he said almost nothing. The creator of the universe, who could have called down legions of angels, chose silence. That silence was not passive. It was powerful. It revealed control, divine restraint, and absolute confidence in the Father's plan. That moment shows us the essence of spiritual strength, the ability to hold one's peace in the face of provocation. When you choose silence instead of retaliation, you align yourself with the wisdom of heaven rather than the noise of the world. Silence protects you from saying things you can never take back. Words spoken in anger are like arrows. They cannot be recalled once released. How many relationships have been destroyed because someone couldn't resist responding to disrespect? How many opportunities lost, reputations ruined, or hearts wounded because pride demanded a reaction? The moment you feel disrespected is not the time to defend yourself. It is the time to demonstrate your strength. In silence, you show that you are ruled not by emotion, but by principle. You refuse to let another person's chaos pull you out of your character. Silence also disarms those who seek to provoke you. When someone insults you, they expect a reaction. They want to see you flinch, get angry, or justify yourself. But when you remain quiet, you rob them of their power. Your composure unsettles them because it reveals a truth they can't deny. You are above their offense. There's an authority in quiet confidence that words can't match. It tells the world, I know my worth. I don't need to argue for it. True strength is not proven in what you say. It's revealed in what you can hold back. The person who must always respond is a prisoner to their pride. But the one who can stand in silence possesses freedom. That freedom comes from understanding that your identity doesn't depend on another person's opinion. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. Your peace is your proof. You are not diminished by their disrespect. You are defined by your response to it. Moreover, silence invites God into the situation. When you step back, you make room for divine intervention. Scripture reminds us, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Silence after disrespect is not abandonment. It's entrusting justice to the only one who sees every heart and motive. While you stay quiet, heaven begins to move. God defends those who refuse to defend themselves in pride. He lifts those who humble themselves and vindicates those who trust his timing. To remain silent when insulted requires faith. Faith that God sees what was done, that he values your restraint, and that he will handle what you cannot. It's not easy. Everything inside you may scream for a response, but every time you hold your tongue, you are exercising spiritual muscle. You are training your soul to walk in peace rather than pride, in wisdom rather than impulse. Over time, that discipline changes you. It gives you serenity that cannot be shaken and a confidence that cannot be stolen. Silence is not about ignoring wrongs. It's about choosing the right way to face them. When you are quiet, you're not pretending it didn't hurt. You're choosing to let God heal it rather than letting anger worsen it. You are protecting your peace, your dignity, and your destiny. For some battles are won not with words, but with wisdom. So when disrespect comes, and it will, remember silence is not defeat. It is the stance of those who know the value of their words, the depth of their spirit, and the strength of their God. Remaining quiet doesn't mean you are weak. It means you are wise enough to let truth and time speak louder than your emotions ever could. That kind of silence is sacred. It's not emptiness, it's power under control. It's the language of those who have learned that real strength doesn't shout. It stands still. Patience is one of the greatest demonstrations of spiritual maturity, and waiting before reacting is often the moment when God does his deepest work. The wisdom of waiting isn't about delay for its own sake. It's about alignment. When you wait before responding to disrespect or offense, you give space for God's timing to unfold instead of forcing your own justice. Impulsive reactions often bring regret, but quiet waiting brings revelation. There's a divine process that unfolds in silence, a sacred rhythm where the human heart learns to let go of control and trust that God will do what is right in his time. When someone disrespects you, your flesh demands an instant reaction. The natural impulse is to defend your name, your worth, or your dignity. Yet, spiritual maturity calls you to pause, to wait, and to let your emotions settle before making any move. That pause, those few seconds or even days of silence, can be life-changing. It's in that waiting that you begin to hear the still, small voice of God saying, "Be still, and know that I am God." Waiting doesn't mean weakness. It means you are giving time for truth to rise to the surface and for emotion to lose its grip. There's a reason God often asks his people to wait. Waiting refines character, deepens trust, and clarifies perspective. When you wait before reacting, you begin to see beyond the immediate insult. You start to discern what's really happening. Often, disrespect is not about you. It's a reflection of the other person's insecurity, pain, or pride. But if you respond too quickly, you'll never see that. Waiting lets you step back and see the situation through God's eyes, not your own hurt. It shifts you from reaction to revelation. The wisdom of waiting also allows time for divine intervention. Many times when you stay silent and refuse to retaliate, God moves on your behalf in ways you couldn't imagine. He exposes motives, softens hearts, or redirects outcomes entirely. What seemed like a setback becomes protection, and what felt like humiliation becomes preparation. But you only see that if you wait. If you rush to react, you interrupt what God is arranging. His justice is perfect, but his timing is deliberate. Patience is a form of faith. It says, "God, I trust you enough not to rush this. I believe you'll handle what I can't." The one who waits wisely refuses to let emotion be the master. Instead, they let wisdom rule the moment. And while the world may see that as passivity, heaven sees it as partnership. God works most powerfully in those who know how to wait quietly and let him lead. There is also protection in waiting. Every hasty word, every impulsive reaction, can plant seeds that bring unwanted consequences. How many times have people said something in anger, only to wish they could take it back? The tongue is a sword, and waiting keeps it sheathed until the right moment. The wisdom of waiting means you don't let temporary feelings create permanent damage. Silence during insult becomes a guardrail that keeps your destiny intact. In waiting, something beautiful happens, you grow. Waiting develops emotional intelligence, humility, and discernment. You begin to realize that not every comment deserves a response, not every attack requires a counterattack. You learn to pick your battles, and more importantly, to let God fight the ones that belong to him. Waiting shifts the focus from the offender to the lesson. It turns moments of disrespect into moments of development. Sometimes the greatest victories are not in what you say, but in what you refuse to say. The waiting heart learns that peace is more valuable than proving a point, and dignity is stronger than defense. The world says, "Do something about it," but wisdom whispers, "Wait and watch what God will do." The longer you walk with him, the more you realize that his timing is perfect, his justice is complete, and his defense is unstoppable. So when you are disrespected, and everything in you wants to respond, remember this: the pause is your protection. That moment of waiting gives heaven room to act. The wisdom of waiting is not silence born of fear. It's silence filled with faith. You are not doing nothing. You are allowing God to do everything. And when he does, the outcome will be far greater than anything your words could have achieved. The tongue is one of the smallest members of the body, yet it holds unimaginable power. It can heal or harm, bless or break, build or destroy. Scripture calls it a fire, a world of iniquity, and that description is no exaggeration. In moments of disrespect, our tongue becomes the first weapon we reach for. We feel justified in using it, believing that our words can defend our honor or restore our dignity. But in reality, when we speak from anger or offense, we often cause more damage to ourselves than to those who insulted us. Guarding the tongue after being disrespected is not about suppressing emotion. It is about surrendering control to wisdom. Every reaction reveals the state of the heart. When you guard your words, you protect your peace. The urge to respond, to lash out, to set the record straight, is strong because pride whispers that silence looks weak. But silence is often the greatest evidence of strength. The moment you feel disrespected is when your tongue must be most carefully watched. One careless word, one harsh sentence, can undo years of grace and maturity. That's why Scripture says, "Be slow to speak and slow to anger." It's a divine command that shields us from our own impulses. There's a reason why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we might listen twice as much as we speak. When you guard your tongue, you give wisdom the chance to guide your response. You pause long enough for your emotions to cool and for your spirit to hear God's direction. Many of the greatest regrets in life come from words spoken too quickly. Guarding your tongue is a spiritual discipline that protects your integrity, your relationships, and your testimony. People may forget what was said to you, but they will remember how you responded. Guarding the tongue also prevents spiritual contamination. Words are spiritual containers. They carry either life or death. When you speak from anger, you release poison into your own atmosphere. It affects your peace, your focus, and even your faith. But when you stay quiet, you allow that poison to die in silence rather than spread through speech. Some battles are won simply by refusing to speak them into existence. When you guard your tongue, you refuse to give power to offense. You starve the fire of disrespect by withholding the oxygen of your words. The disciplined tongue is a reflection of a transformed heart. It shows that you no longer live according to impulse, but by the Spirit. Every time you resist the urge to respond in anger, you grow in spiritual strength. You learn that your value is not determined by what others say, but by who you are in God's eyes. Guarding your tongue becomes easier when you truly know your identity. You no longer need to prove or defend yourself because you trust that truth will stand on its own. There's also wisdom in silence that words can never express. When you choose not to respond to disrespect, people notice. Your composure speaks volumes. It reveals maturity and discernment. It teaches those around you that dignity doesn't require debate. The more you guard your tongue, the more influence you gain. People may not remember the insults thrown at you, but they will remember your calm. That calm becomes your witness, your strength, and your message. Guarding the tongue doesn't mean never speaking. It means knowing when to speak and how. It means letting words be few but full of grace, measured by truth and guided by love. There will be moments when silence is wisdom, and there will be moments when gentle truth must be spoken. The key is discernment, and that discernment grows when you learn to be still before you speak. Every time you guard your tongue, you open space for God's voice to be heard instead of your own. So when disrespect comes, and it surely will, remember that your tongue can either escalate the fire or extinguish it. Guarding it is not about losing your voice, it's about preserving your power. The one who can master their tongue can master their destiny. You cannot control what others say, but you can always control what you allow yourself to say in return. That is where true strength lies. A guarded tongue is a gatekeeper of peace, a protector of honor, and a sign of wisdom that the world cannot imitate. When you learn to guard your tongue after disrespect, you will discover that silence is not empty. It is full of victory. When disrespect comes, the natural response is to see it through the lens of emotion. We feel wronged, misunderstood, or belittled, and our pride rises in defense. But spiritual growth requires a shift in vision, a move from human emotion to divine perspective. When you begin to see life through God's eyes, every insult, every act of disrespect becomes more than an attack, it becomes a lesson. You start to realize that God often uses the behavior of others to refine your character, strengthen your patience, and expose areas within you that still need healing. The divine perspective doesn't react, it reflects. It asks, "What is God teaching me here?" instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" The difference between emotional reaction and divine understanding is monumental. Emotion wants revenge, but divine perspective seeks revelation. Emotion shouts, "They can't treat me like this," while divine wisdom whispers, "Let me show you how to rise above this." When you see disrespect through spiritual eyes, you realize that it is not always about you. It may be about what God is doing in you. Sometimes, the very people who hurt or insult you are the instruments God uses to polish your humility and deepen your compassion. What was meant to offend you can actually elevate you if you look at it through the right lens. Emotions are temporary, but God's perspective is eternal. When you react emotionally, you bind yourself to the moment. When you see divinely, you rise above it. You no longer see a person trying to harm you. You see a human being acting out of their own brokenness. That shift changes everything. It doesn't excuse their behavior, but it frees you from being chained to it. Divine perspective liberates you from the cycle of offense. It allows you to walk in peace even when others are trying to provoke chaos. You begin to understand that your real battle is not with flesh and blood, but with the unseen forces that use conflict to derail your peace. Having God's perspective means trusting that He sees what you cannot. He knows the motives, the reasons, and the wounds behind the actions of others. When someone disrespects you, God isn't ignoring it, He's observing your response. He's giving you a chance to choose spirit over self. And every time you do, you grow stronger in wisdom and deeper in grace. What looks like disrespect on the surface can actually become the training ground for patience and endurance. Heaven often tests us not with comfort, but with confrontation, not with praise, but with provocation. The divine view also teaches you to separate your identity from the opinions of others. When you see yourself as God sees you, the words of others lose their power. Their disrespect doesn't define you. It exposes their lack of understanding. The moment you stop viewing insults as personal attacks and start seeing them as opportunities to practice peace, you step into spiritual maturity. You stop needing to be right and start desiring to be righteous. You stop asking, "How could they?" and start praying, "Lord, help me respond as you would." Divine perspective is not natural. It must be cultivated through prayer, reflection, and humility. The more time you spend in God's presence, the less the disrespect of others can disturb your spirit. His perspective brings calm where emotion brings chaos. It allows you to look beyond the surface and see the spiritual dynamics at work. Instead of being consumed by the hurt, you become anchored in purpose. You understand that every insult, every misunderstanding, is another chance to reveal Christ's character in you. When you live by divine perspective, you no longer measure your worth by how others treat you. You measure it by how closely your response reflects God's heart. You realize that disrespect doesn't lower your value. It tests your vision. If you can see through heaven's eyes, every offense becomes an invitation to demonstrate grace. That is where true transformation begins. You stop reacting out of pain and start responding out of purpose. You begin to walk in a peace that no insult can steal, a dignity that no disrespect can touch, and a faith that no offense can shake. Disrespect has a way of uncovering what lies beneath the surface of the soul. It's easy to appear kind, composed, and spiritual when life flows smoothly and people treat you well. But when someone dishonors you, speaks against you, or belittles your worth, what's truly inside you begins to emerge. That moment becomes a test of character, a mirror reflecting whether you are ruled by pride or peace, by flesh or faith. Every act of disrespect is not just a human encounter, it's a divine examination. God allows such moments not to shame us, but to reveal us, to show us how much we've grown and where we still need to grow. A person's response to disrespect tells you more about them than any success or public display ever could. Words, attitudes, and reactions are the evidence of the heart's condition. When someone mocks or criticizes you and you remain calm, you prove that your spirit has matured beyond the control of your emotions. When you stay composed in the face of offense, you demonstrate mastery over your inner world. True character isn't shaped by comfort, it's forged in conflict. It's not revealed on the mountaintop of applause, but in the valley of insult. God uses the sting of disrespect to strengthen your spiritual backbone. He lets certain people cross your path to test your humility and endurance. Sometimes the ones who hurt you most are the ones God uses to purify you. Every offense becomes an opportunity to choose Christ-like behavior over carnal reaction. The test of character is not about how loudly you can defend yourself, but how quietly you can trust that God will defend you. You are never more like Christ than when you endure injustice without bitterness. That silence, that restraint, is the echo of His own heart when He stood silent before His accusers. Many want to be used by God, but few are willing to be tested by Him. Disrespect is one of those hidden tests that separates surface believers from true disciples. It reveals who can remain faithful when misunderstood and who can remain kind when misjudged. It's easy to love those who love you, but the real test comes when you must love those who disrespect you. That kind of love doesn't come naturally, it comes supernaturally. It requires grace that goes beyond human ability, and that grace only flows from a heart that has been refined by the fire of testing. Character is not formed in the moment you are insulted, it's revealed there. Whatever has been growing in your heart, peace or pride, patience or resentment, will come to the surface. That's why Scripture tells us to guard our hearts, because the issues of life flow from them. If your heart is full of peace, disrespect cannot disrupt you. But if your heart is filled with pride, even the smallest slight will ignite anger. Disrespect doesn't change you, it exposes you. And when you see what it reveals, you have the chance to grow. The test of character also teaches you that silence is not surrender but self-control. To stay quiet when your reputation is attacked or your motives questioned requires immense strength. The weak man reacts, the strong man reflects. Character is measured not by how well you fight, but by how well you restrain. Every time you hold your peace in the face of provocation, you are proving that God's Spirit reigns within you. You are declaring that you trust Him more than you trust your own defense. That is the essence of true maturity. In the end, the test of character is not about the disrespect itself. It's about what you allow it to do in you. Will it make you bitter or better? Will it harden your heart or humble it? Every offense is an opportunity to rise higher in grace and deeper in wisdom. If you let it, disrespect can become your greatest teacher, shaping you into someone who no longer seeks validation from people but strength from God. When you pass that test, when you stay calm, gracious, and steady even in the face of insult, you demonstrate a faith that is real, unshakable, and radiant. That's when you begin to reflect not the reaction of man, but the nature of Christ Himself. There is a deep peace that comes when you stop trying to fight every battle and instead let God be your defender. Human instinct urges us to protect our name, prove our worth, and justify our actions. We want others to know our side of the story, to see that we were right and they were wrong. But the more you try to defend yourself, the more entangled you become in the web of conflict. Letting God be your defender means releasing that urge and trusting that His justice is far greater than anything you could accomplish on your own. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a declaration of faith. You are saying, God, I trust You enough to handle what I cannot. When people disrespect you, slander you, or twist your words, your silence invites God to step in. Every time you choose not to retaliate, you give Him room to work. The moment you begin defending yourself out of pride, you step into His place. But when you remain quiet and keep your peace, heaven begins to move on your behalf. God sees what others don't. He knows the truth that's hidden behind the noise of accusation. And His defense is perfect. It not only protects your reputation, but also refines your character. Letting God defend you requires patience, because His timing rarely aligns with our own. We want instant vindication, but God works in ways that often take time to unfold. While you're waiting, He's arranging circumstances, revealing motives, and aligning outcomes. What feels like silence from heaven is often divine strategy in motion. Your job is to stay still, to hold your peace, and to resist the temptation to take matters into your own hands. The same God who vindicated Joseph in Egypt, Daniel in Babylon, and David before Saul will also vindicate you, but only if you allow Him to. One of the hardest lessons to learn in spiritual maturity is that not every attack deserves an answer. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. When you stop defending yourself, people begin to notice that your peace is unshakable, and in time, truth has a way of surfacing. Lies fade, rumors collapse, and the same mouths that criticized you are forced to acknowledge the hand of God on your life. Vindication from God carries a weight that human defense never could. When He fights for you, the victory is total, undeniable, and often silent. There's a divine power in surrendering the need to be understood. It frees you from the exhausting cycle of justification and argument. When you truly believe that God is your defender, you no longer waste energy trying to prove yourself. You live in peace, knowing that truth doesn't need a lawyer. It needs time. The more you let God handle your battles, the stronger your faith becomes. You begin to see that His justice doesn't always look like yours. Sometimes His defense is not about proving you right, but about developing righteousness within you. Letting God defend you also protects your spirit from bitterness. When you try to defend yourself, anger lingers and pride grows. But when you give it to God, peace replaces resentment. You realize that no person's opinion can alter your purpose, and no slander can stop your destiny. God has the final word, not people. Every insult becomes another opportunity for Him to demonstrate His faithfulness. You are never safer than when you let the Almighty handle your case. In the end, the defense of God is both a shield and a testimony. It shields you from the traps of pride and vengeance while testifying to the power of faith. People who see your calmness in the face of disrespect begin to wonder what anchors you. And that's where God gets the glory. You become a living witness that trust in Him is not theoretical, it's transformational. When you let God be your defender, you trade anxiety for assurance, reaction for revelation, and fear for faith. You stand firm, unshaken, knowing that the one who sees in secret will reward you openly. And when He does, His defense will speak louder than anything you could have ever said. There is a sacred transformation that takes place when you learn to stay quiet after being disrespected. At first, it feels unnatural. Your pride resists, your emotions boil, and every instinct tells you to fight back. But if you can endure that tension and choose stillness over reaction, something deep within you begins to change. That silence becomes a spiritual furnace where your heart is purified, your thoughts are clarified, and your spirit grows stronger. Transformation through stillness doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, refining process where God reshapes your inner life through moments of humility and restraint. When you stay quiet in the face of offense, you create room for spiritual maturity to develop. The noise of anger, defense, and pride fades, and what's left is the gentle whisper of God's voice. In that quiet, He reveals truths you couldn't have heard while speaking in haste. He shows you that peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of trust. Silence allows you to process pain through prayer instead of through argument. It shifts your focus from the person who hurt you to the one who heals you. In that stillness, God does what your words never could. He restores your heart. Transformation begins when you stop seeing silence as suppression and start seeing it as surrender. You are not burying your emotions. You are handing them over to the Lord. You're saying, God, I could speak, but I'd rather you speak for me. I could act, but I'd rather you act through me. That kind of surrender opens the door to divine wisdom. You start responding not from emotion, but from revelation. You realize that your silence isn't empty, it's full of faith. It becomes a declaration that you trust God's justice more than your reaction. Stillness also teaches you mastery over your inner world. The person who can remain quiet after being disrespected has learned to govern their own spirit. Proverbs says, "He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that rules his spirit than he that takes a city." Self-control is greater than conquest because it's victory over the most difficult enemy, yourself. Every time you hold your peace, you grow stronger on the inside. You begin to walk with a calmness that confusion cannot disturb. You gain discernment, patience, and endurance. Silence doesn't just protect your peace, it deepens it. Transformation through stillness also refines how you see others. You stop viewing disrespect as an attack and start seeing it as a test. You begin to empathize with those who hurt you, realizing they may be speaking from their own wounds. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it frees you from resentment. The quiet heart no longer seeks revenge, it seeks understanding. You learn to forgive faster, to release deeper, and to love without condition. That is the mark of a transformed soul, a heart that no longer mirrors the pain it receives, but reflects the grace it's been given. Stillness gives birth to wisdom. When you refrain from reacting immediately, you allow insight to mature. You see situations more clearly, discern motives more accurately, and respond more effectively. Many people lose blessings because they act before understanding. But those who wait, those who stay still long enough to listen, find that God gives them the right words at the right time, or sometimes the wisdom to say nothing at all. Silence becomes their strategy, their strength, their shield. Ultimately, staying quiet after disrespect leads you to a higher way of living. You move beyond offense into peace, beyond pride into purpose. You no longer measure your value by how others treat you, but by how God transforms you. Each time you choose stillness, you're shaping the kind of person heaven can trust with influence and authority. The quiet spirit is not passive. It is powerful. It carries grace that commands respect without demanding it. Transformation through stillness is the process by which God turns your restraint into radiance, your silence into strength, and your pain into wisdom. In that quiet place, you don't lose yourself. You find the version of you that reflects Him most.